Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we'll be doing a box office update for this weekend, which sees Jackass Forever decimating Moonfall. And the reason why that is so incredibly not just important, but also insane when you really think about and break down the numbers is that Jackass Forever cost only $10 million and is based off of a 22-year-old property starting off as a TV series, whereas Moonfall is an original sci-fi thriller by Roland Emmerich, which cost $146 million in its production budgets. Now, of course, I think that there are definitely arguments to be made as to why a film like Moonfall would be failing in a movie, or rather in a weekend like this, and why Jackass Forever would be succeeding, especially when you compare the budgets to them. But we'll dive further into those numbers in just a second. Before going any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, loud that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way, you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. Also, a special announcement that there will be no live stream tonight. I put this out on social media earlier today, but just in case you're someone who does not follow on various social media platforms for a wide variety of reasons, but listen or watch my videos, just know no live stream tonight. Family is in town. But Jackass Forever is strutting at the box office with a $20+ million opening weekend domestically, whereas Moonfall is plummeting to earth, says Deadline, with $9+ million as of this Saturday. These are all based off of the Thursday, Friday numbers that are being reported based on the different metrics, based on the different ways in which they process the information and the projections. This is exactly what they expect the film to make over the next day or two. So you could see a higher number come out from Jackass, you could see a higher number come out from Moonfall, or you could see a lower one as well. As it says here, a $10 million movie based on a 22-year-old reality TV series is decimating a $146 million production based on a fatigued disaster movie genre this weekend. And obviously, I will once again call out Deadline here for the opining. And again, people can argue and say, don't you opine? Absolutely. And I admit to that fact that I opine. However, it is, I think, important that these websites, these news sites, which are meant to be, again, news sites, are meant to be focused more so on the news, do a lot to either run cover for studios or run cover for films that they happened to have some type of connection with, that happen to fit certain, SJW criteria, right, that happen to fit their social agenda warrior messaging. Whereas they tend to not throw cover for films that either don't fit that, or just for some reason or another are just not fitting in the criteria, maybe not paying them enough to do so. But that is a discussion for an entirely different day. As it goes on, and more to the point, Paramount's Jackass Forever is rallying to a $20.7 million number one weekend, well ahead of the Roland Emmerich film Moonfall. And I will say this much, that they are saying it's doing better than expected based on their own projections, the industry projections. However, as we had talked about in a previous video, Box Office Pro actually had this film projected to make in the $20 million range. For them, their final number was around $26 million. Their range was 22 to 32 million, so it still could fall within the range that Box Office Pro had. It depends on how it does today and tomorrow, obviously. Moonfall, they actually expected to make somewhere between $9 and $14 million, and so this will fall, or right now is expected to fall, within this range, in fact, lower part of this range. Either way, it's not looking good for Moonfall. Moonfall is set to, at this point, being a wide release, costing $146 million, needing to make around $365 million to break even, not making anything here in the domestic marketplace, and likely not to make much else anywhere, is going to lead to it being one of the biggest box office flops of the year so far. Whereas Jackass Forever, with its $10 million budget, even if it does hit that lower end of $20 to $22 million, will be very close to its break even and likely will pass it with any of its international releases. It goes on to say, such disparities is what's making the movie business and box office endlessly intriguing. One would think that both of these movies would be prime for streaming. With a theatrical day-and-date model, Viacom CBS needs to trick out their own Paramount Plus streaming service, while we already knew pre-pandemic that disaster movies about falling NYC edifices and eroding West Coast shorelines weren't working pre-pandemic, looking at Geostorm, etc. Well, I will say this much, that I don't necessarily believe or agree that it's the disaster film specifically that is the reason as to why the films haven't done well. I think it's more so the type of disaster film that's being told, right? The repetition of certain narratives, the repetition of certain storylines. I think also the type of actors that you have into those films, right? The originality of them. Because you can also look to other films in the last several years, especially films starring The Rock, right? Where you have a film like Rampage, for instance, that came out. And though it was technically based off of a video game, I would definitely say there is some destruction elements of it. You could also look at San Andreas probably being the best example. And San Andreas, when at the time it was being talked about, was not really talked about as being a major flop in any way whatsoever. Talking about the Friday numbers, $9.6 million for Jackass Forever, Moonfall to $3.4 million, Spider-Man No Way Home in third place for the first time at $2 million. So Moonfall is going to be fighting 50 days of release of Spider-Man No Way Home, brand new release Moonfall, not looking very good for that one. But I do think it might be important to bring up that comparison. So let's see and look at San Andreas, because again, they are claiming that it is the disaster movie genre that is the problem. So San Andreas came out back in 2015, so I guess maybe they would try to argue that this was a different time, and so therefore the film would have done better because of that. But 2015 really wasn't all that long ago. And as you can see from these numbers, it made $155 million domestically, $300 plus million internationally, making $456 million there. The film made, in comparison to its budget, 4.1 times the budget, so it was able to break even and make a pretty good amount of actual net gains, net profits on top of that. For those wondering, when a film needs to make 2.5 times its production budget to break even, so at 4.1 times its budget, we are looking at some pretty good profits there. Let's see if we can put this up against, again, I love creating these comparison charts. Very, very great feature, I would say, of the website, thenumbers.com. Would definitely highly recommend it. So we have this new film, Moonfall, and this will also allow us to compare them properly and actually have them adjusted for inflation, as, again, that's the only real way that you can compare these numbers to each other. So as you can see, San Andreas, when adjusted for inflation, is looking around $495 million, whereas Moonfall is set to be around 3.4. Opening weekend numbers for San Andreas was $59.3 million, where this film's Moonfall is expected to have $9 million in receipts. This film came out in May, San Andreas, so again, beginning of summertime. Moonfall coming out in February, which is not typically a strong month for film releases. However, definitely still one worth talking about nonetheless, as just being a general release at all. I will say, though, looking at these numbers, it just does not seem to fit the narrative. Again, they like to cherry pick and say, hey, Geostorm didn't do very well, but Geostorm also had really bad marketing and also featured, was it Gerard Butler that was in Geostorm or something like that? So I really honestly don't think that's a great example necessarily of proving the point that, again, we knew pre-pandemic that disaster films were not working. When you have films like San Andreas, which is the very epitome of disaster films, doing as well as it did, even back, going so far back as 2015. So again, it's not the disaster model. It's the type of story that's being told. It's who's in the movie. It's how it's being marketed. Is it being marketed well? Are they bringing audiences in by seemingly telling a compelling and interesting story? And a story about the moon falling to the earth just does not come across as being very compelling. I will agree to one point that it does seem to come across as more of a straight to streaming type movie. The only thing I would disagree with that with is the fact that the film costs as much as it did, as being a reason why it wouldn't really fit well on the streaming platform. That being said, I don't really know how much these films that go straight to Netflix, that are meant to go straight to Netflix, typically cost, but I imagine that they do have to weigh those options, right, of how much do we spend on this movie versus how many people do we expect to sign up for the service, how many people are going to be enticed to actually watch this film, and also how is it that they're actually able to really determine any type of profits from films that are put out on their platform. Is it just based on the numbers of subscriptions? Is it just based on the number of people that watch the content? It's really hard to kind of get a metric on that. I would love for someone to actually be able to figure out those numbers to break down really whether a film can be truly financially successful if it is an exclusive Netflix release or Amazon release, etc., when it is there on the platform for free and not, of course, being a PVOD model. However, as it goes on, despite all the noise back in the fall that Paramount was disbanding theatrical and the switch off between studio bosses, Paramount at this point the power of the brand and knows the power of the brand and how theatrical is essential for launches. So Jackass is repping their third #1 opening film of the pandemic, with A Quiet Place Part 2 and Scream being the others. And so again, the thought process was that they would be moving to all Paramount Plus day and date releases, or at the very least direct releases on Paramount Plus. But I will say it's definitely a good idea for them to have not done this with Jackass Forever, because it costs so little money. There's already a fan base. Again, this has been around for over 22 years at this point. You have very fertile ground in the marketing department, because this is the type of entertainment, right? People causing injury to themselves, to be able to have massive campaigns on things like TikTok and YouTube and other social media platforms. And it's going to be able to appeal not only to that audiences that have been around for the last 22 years, but then also the audiences that have picked up over the last several years, and also brand new audiences, right? We're in that TikTok generation. And so a lot of people might say, hey, this actually looks kind of like fun. Or, hey, this actually looks like it might be fun to watch with my friends in theaters. And that is, I think, one of the many reasons why we are seeing in this release a film doing as well as it is doing as far as Jackass is concerned. So very good news for Jackass, looking pretty good. Not looking like it is, at least at this point, going to get closer to the $30 million mark, which is what I thought it had potential to do. However, it is still doing quite well, while Moonfall is actually doing a lot worse. And can't really say I'm all that surprised. I think it has more to do with the fact that the film features actors that are not really known for bringing people out. Not that even actors bring people out to the theaters anymore. It's the movies, it's the stories, it's the marketing. It's exactly how are you going to entice people, fans in general, movie fans, IP fans, in order to bring them out. Jackass Forever was able to figure out how to do it, and was also able to do so on much less money, whereas Moonfall was not. And I think that at the end of the day, that is going to be the story when it comes to, you know, the story of these two films, is that one was able to use money wisely, was able to use money effectively, was able to use its own brand to sell itself, essentially, whereas the other, instead of having an interesting, unique concept that could actually bring sci-fi fans out, decided instead to tell a story, seemingly to tell a story that was a little bit more long in the tooth, was a little bit more, I guess, kind of old and dated, as far as really not taking the genre any further in any direction whatsoever. Because again, San Andreas showed that disaster films can indeed sell well. You just got to be able to actually sell them. And that's, I think, been the #1 problem of the pandemic, has not been the Omicron, or has not been the virus itself. Obviously, they've tried very hard to make it that, right? The fear-mongering has been nonstop and has been relentless. But it's very clear to me, at least, that the main reason why we've seen the amount of box office flops that we have been seeing is because they don't know how to entice people to spend money that is very tight right now, in the midst of course, hyperinflation, in the midst of so many people being out of work, in the midst of so many people dealing with all of the nonsense that has been caused over the last several years. How are you going to entice them to say, hey, this is worth me going out to a theater to go see, to spend money on, to spend a premium amount of money on, in addition to popcorn and soft drinks, etc., and actually have a darn good time? I'm looking at these two films and I think to myself, hey, Jackass Forever, that's a film I would love to see with some friends and have a really good time. Whereas Moonfall is one where I would look at and say, okay, this looks like the same generic disaster film that's been released. There's nothing really new or unique about it. There's nothing, even as far as the actors are concerned, that's unique about it. So what is the motivation for me wanting to actually go see it? And I think that's something that Hollywood needs to really figure out. And based on the fact that many films that have been set to be released last few years have been delayed and are now getting released for the first time, it's looking like Hollywood's still got a ways to go. At least based on this information is what we're getting and what we are getting in at over time. So what are y'all's thoughts, though? Are you, obviously, probably not surprised. If you've been following my channel, you know that Jackass Forever is expected to break and win the weekend very easily. But are you surprised that Moonfall is plummeting as hard as it is, right? Expected to make probably somewhere closer to 9 million, the lower end of its range, whereas Jackass Forever is expected to probably fall just right into the range of, at least the range of Box Office Pro. And where do you think these films are going to land, especially in the realm of film history? I think a lot more people, it's sad to say in this way in certain respects, even though I would consider myself technically to be a fan of the franchise, that Jackass Forever is likely to be remembered a lot more than Moonfall is. And it's very sad, because I think that there is a hunger in their audience for sci-fi films out there. I speak to them a lot every day, but they're too busy watching classic sci-fi films that told really good stories, instead of seeing these newer ones, which seem to be stuck just in the same place. So will Hollywood innovate? Who knows? Probably not. But what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Remember, no live stream tonight, so I should see you all on Tuesday. Have a wonderful day, blessed weekend, and as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my Patreon Subscribe Star and Locals members, starting off with Patreon animation commentator Brandon, let's go Brandon, Brian P, Christopher Bowman, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you Father, Father Damian Cook, Fuzz Aldrin, Garrett Searles, Hannibal Grimm, Harold Francis, Hymir Ari Hymason, Inflamed Wood, Jacob Juice, Jeffrey Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Gomer Kyles 79, Laura, The Modern Major General's Story, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mondo Spieler, Mr. Peabody, On to June, Orange Hat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Ellen, Stan Andrian, Teresa Martin, or Miss Martin Muses, Theodore Benden, Tina Bojan, and Tina B, the Empress of the Universe. Thank you very much for supporting me over on Patreon. Also to my Subscribe Star peeps, UAB Mad Dog, which is Mr. Mike Jackson, Storm Tracker, The R, Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, Stand For, John B, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man. Thank you all very much for supporting me over on the Subscribe Star platform. And to my 3 local supporters, we got Kara Tharp, UAB Mad Dog, which is once again Mike Jackson, super supporter over there, and Robert Barnes. Thank you very much for supporting me over on the Locals platform. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, please think about signing up on either of those platforms. You can find a link in the description below that will lead you to all of those different pages. It is known as the Willow link, as it is w.lo link, and it will have all the links to that, to the Discord channel, to all different kinds of places, including places to support me as well. At the Citizen of Asgardian level, you get Citizen of Asgardian level is how it's labeled on Patreon. Still need to fix that, but Citizen of Asgard level, you get a shout out at the end of every live stream and video. If you join at the Army of Asgard level, you also access to a giveaways channel, which is featured on the Discord that I have. I know, River, it is very exciting. It is so exciting, where you get giveaways for things like 4K titles, Steelbook titles, etc. Again, I got some 4K Steelbooks of The Punisher, for instance. I've got 4Ks of tons of other movies, so I'm giving those away all the time. So if that sounds interesting to you, join the Army of Asgard level. Also, at the Keep of the Bifrost level, you get all of that stuff, plus you get access to a once a month and maybe twice a month. We're trying to add an extra podcast in there of me and John the Flick Pick Flickinger, where we talk about movies, and also you get to ask your questions. Any questions that you want to ask, you get to ask with that podcast. And then you have the Chosen of Valhalla level, which gives you access to all of those, and also a once a month podcast where you get to be featured with me on the main channel. We all get to talk together about movies, culture, pop culture, anything really that the Chosen want to talk about, or anything the Chosen want to promote is on the table. So if you like that, join at the Chosen of Valhalla level. Also, during your first month of support, you get a free t-shirt. Any t-shirt that you want from the main store, you get access to, and I do ship internationally anywhere in the world. Anyway, you guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.